This is Aidan Toner Rogers. He's a 26-year-old PhD student at MIT and the author of some groundbreaking research that showed scientists at a large US firm who were using artificial intelligence tools were wildly successful in discovering new materials, filing new patents, and generating new prototypes. His work was widely publicized by prestigious institutions, media outlets, and of course the AI bros were all pumping this study, claiming that this was proof that AI would soon be doing its own science. Science! But there's just one problem. Aidan Toner Rogers is a fraud. He made it all up. For all we know, the lab and the scientists in it don't even exist, and I just freaking love this story. It's the perfect example of how otherwise credible people have just totally bought into this AI hype hook, line, and sinker without anything resembling skepticism, and that has created an environment where crooks and frauds can thrive. What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and this story begins on December 29th of last year with this article in the Wall Street Journal. Will AI help or hurt workers? One 26-year-old found an unexpected answer. New research shows AI made some workers more productive, but less happy. And shown here in the picture in the middle there is Aidan Toner Rogers, the fraud behind this study. That guy closest to me there is Darren Acemoglu. That is the Nobel Prize winning economist who is Aidan's professor, who was also pumping this work far and wide. And all the way on the other side there is a fellow MIT professor named David Autor, also who sponsored this work and has been ranting and raving all about it. Now you might be asking, why is the dog in the picture? And that's an excellent question. I'm guessing somebody thought it would make them all look maybe more quirky and eccentric and therefore more genius-like. Darren Acemoglu, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor who recently won the Nobel Prize in Economics, worries that artificial intelligence will worsen income inequality and not do all that much for productivity. His friend and colleague David Autor is more hopeful, believing that AI could do just the opposite. New research from Aidan Toner Rogers, an MIT doctoral student, challenges both Acemoglu's pessimism and Autor's optimism. Both professors are raving about it. "It's fantastic," said Acemoglu. "I was floored," said Autor. To figure out where AI might fit, economists need careful studies of its use in today's workplace. Toner Rogers' paper does just that. His work examines the randomized introductions of an AI tool to 1,018 scientists at a material science research lab. And gosh, that is a lot of scientists. The lab that Toner Rogers studied randomly assigned teams of researchers to start using the tool in 3 waves starting in May of 2022. Curious that this study began 6 months before the world went crazy for AI. It's another red flag that maybe somebody should have caught. After Toner Rogers approached the lab, it agreed to work with him, but didn't want its identity disclosed. Now that's curious right there. Why would a prestigious academic institution like MIT with Nobel Prize winning professors not ask a simple question like, what lab? And then just let this kid get away with saying, well, the lab doesn't want their identity disclosed. And also, a lab with 1,018 scientists engaged in material science research, how many labs could possibly fit that description? But I digress. Now, what Toner Rogers found was striking. After the tool was implemented, researchers discovered 44% more materials. Their patent filings rose by 39%, and there was a 17% increase in product prototypes. That is a shockingly, overwhelmingly positive result. As a matter of fact, it's so good, it's too good to be true, and yet nobody asked, is this too good to be true? Everybody just took this and ran with it and said, oh look, it's the most amazing new science. Science! Now, here's the study in question. It's actually still available on the website for the National Bureau of Economic Research, where Toner Rogers was invited to present his findings. This is 77 pages of academic bovine excrement. I mean, look at some of this stuff. Look, we got graphics here. We've got all kinds of charts available. Oh, look, there's formulas with a whole bunch of Greek letters, so you know this is smart stuff. And look, we've even got all of Toner Rogers' fake data presented in this easy to understand visual format. This is some top shelf bullshit. And of course, the press got wind of this study and they just ran with it, of course, without asking any questions. Toner Rogers was interviewed in The Atlantic here, the scientist versus the machine. What happened when AI took over these researchers' jobs? The American Enterprise Institute called this an encouraging study on the transformative potential of AI. Of course, AI Insider runs with it. They say NBER study, artificial intelligence may boost research lab output, but could exacerbate existing inequalities. Even the US Patent Office weighed in on this. MIT study aligns with USPTO's inventorship guidance for AI-assisted inventions in material science industry. The Economist took the study and said AI models are dreaming up the materials of the future, better batteries, cleaner bioplastics, and more powerful semiconductors await. Academics were raving on Twitter. This has the potential to change humanity. This is the best paper written so far about the impact of AI on scientific discovery.
Science!
And even major validation for AI-driven research. Yep, everything was going great right up until last week when we got this in the Wall Street Journal. MIT says it no longer stands behind students' AI research paper. The university says it has no confidence in a widely circulated paper by an economics graduate student. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology said Friday it can no longer stand behind a widely circulated paper on artificial intelligence written by a doctoral student in its economics program. In a press release, MIT said it has no confidence in the provenance, reliability, or validity of the data and has no confidence in the veracity of the research contained in the paper. The university said the author of the paper is no longer at MIT. Yikes, that is just about as damning of a condemnation as you can possibly get from an academic institution. They are putting some distance between themselves and this work, or lack thereof. And they're mentioning here the university says the author is no longer at MIT. It seems like Aidan Toner Rogers was kicked out of school over this. The paper was championed by MIT economist Darren Acemoglu, who won the 2024 Economics Nobel, and David Autor. The two said they were approached in January by a computer scientist with experience in material science who questioned how the technology worked and how a lab that he wasn't aware of had experienced gains in innovation. Unable to resolve those concerns, they brought it to the attention of MIT, which began conducting a review. Now, I don't know who this anonymous computer scientist is out there, but finally, somebody started asking questions, but not until after this paper was published, not until after it was presented to the NBER and the press ran with it and all the interviews were given. No peer review was done. Nobody checked on the details. Nobody even asked, is this a real lab with real scientists? Until some guy somewhere raised the question. And when the professors couldn't confirm any of the details, they had to go to the college with what they found. The college withdrew the paper and they kicked the kid out of school. Now, besides this anonymous computer scientist, as far as I can tell, there's only one other person in the whole world who expressed anything resembling skepticism of this work. And you can find that summarized in this article here on Pivot to AI that was written by David Gerard. How to make a splash in AI economics, fake your data. Robert Palgrave, a professor of inorganic chemistry and material science at UCL, goes through a pile of things about the paper that struck him as not quite right, both in December of 2024 and just recently. According to Palgrave, the original paper was too good to be true in many ways. How could a second-year PhD student get pervasive access to extremely sensitive data from what must have been a multi-billion-dollar company? How could such a study have been set up years before this student even started his PhD work in just the right way to deliver results to him? What company really has 1,000 scientists all trying to discover new materials every day, all day? It didn't really make sense as a concept. Intriguing. Now tell me, Aidan, these 1,018 scientists, are they in the room with us now? But there were technical points too. AI using atomistic methods like DFT cannot predict most of the types of materials that were supposedly studied, It can only really work for simple crystalline materials, glasses, and biomaterials. No chance. So I gotta give a special shout out to Robert Palgrave here. Fantastic job asking questions the entire world failed to ask. And when I say the entire world, I'm talking about Nobel Prize winning economists. I'm talking about MIT, the National Bureau of Economic Research, the American Enterprise Institute, the Wall Street Journal. Nobody did the slightest bit of background check on this kid's work to verify anything he was saying was true. Because if any of these academic institutions or government agencies or nonprofits or media outlets had done any digging into Aidan Toner Rogers, maybe they would have realized that he was in the process of creating a fake website to defend his research, as evidenced in this document here from the World Intellectual Property Organization. It seems Corning filed this complaint against Aidan Toner Rogers, alleging that his website that he had registered was a violation of their intellectual property. It seems in January of this year, Aidan Toner Rogers registered the domain name corningresearch.com on Squarespace, as if to create a fake website to suggest that it was Corning Incorporated that was the large U.S. firm with the big lab and the 1,000 scientists where he was doing all of this research. Science! And Corning flat out hauled him in front of the World Patent Office and said, nope, we don't work with you. You're not part of this company. You can't use our name in your website. And because this story just gets better and better the more you peel, I just had to go check out Aidan Toner Rogers' LinkedIn page, and I found some pretty fun details about his background. Shown here in his experience, you can see there he's a PhD student in economics at MIT, or at least he used to be. And right below that, what was Aidan Toner Rogers' job? He was a research analyst at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And before he was a research analyst at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, he was also an intern at the United States Senate. And now you can see why I just love this story. This kid who ends up being a complete fraud made up this whole elaborate story about AI. The entire world ran with it, asked no questions, and it turns out the kid works for the Fed and the Senate. You just can't make this stuff up. And the United States Senate is probably about the only place on earth where Aidan Toner Rogers is going to be able to find work from now on, because his reputation has now been absolutely destroyed. Although he could always just take his work private. He could launch a new startup. You know, you've got academic impropriety at a prestigious academic institution, widespread fraud. Maybe we could take this whole thing, bundle it up into a brand new company. I know, we'll call it Theranos. Then he can go on Jim Cramer's show, and Cramer can fawn and gush over him while he talks all about how everybody fights you when you try to change the world. Think I'm kidding? Check out the footnotes on the bottom of page 1 of Toner Rogers' study. This work was made possible by a grant from the George and Obie Schultz Fund. That's the same George Shultz, now deceased, who's a former U.S. Secretary of State who also sat on the board of directors at Theranos, and it was George Shultz's nephew Tyler who blew the whistle on that company. So long story short, Aidan Toner Rogers isn't an economist and he's not a researcher. He's a fraud, and his work is fake. But the whole world wanted so badly for this story to be true that, like a bunch of chumps, they just took it all at face value. And much like the rest of the AI mania, the people whose job it is to scrutinize this kind of garbage are asleep at the wheel because they're too busy chasing fame or wealth. Now, for the last 2 years on this channel, I've documented accounting frauds, export control violations, scam artists, even international drug cartels using AI to launder money, and nobody cared, because number go up. Now, throughout this whole experience, one of the most common criticisms I've received is that I just don't get the science. Well, maybe that's because at least some of the science was bullshit. Till next time, live small and dream big.